morning, everybody. Yes, a lot of people in the past haven't really thought anything about our native bees here in WA. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of species of bees in Australia and several hundred different species in the southwest. Most people just notice the introduced honeybees, and everything else is just a fly, so it doesn't matter. But when you think about it, for the whole time since Australia came into existence, everything's been pollinated without honeybees being around. So there are very good pollinators out there, and our native bees are some of them. I didn't really get interested until a few years ago when I photographed some bees at Starswan Bushland, and Terry Houston, who was the museum bee expert, started getting all excited and jumping up and down. I can feel a paper coming on here. Because it was a bee that had never been seen before, never been recorded, and it did end up producing a paper. So I got a lot more interested in bees. Problem is, if you don't know what's normal, you don't know what's not normal, so people are missing a lot of things. In your garden, there will be quite a few different native bees, anywhere around Perth. But the commonest ones that you see around are blue-banded bee, which I'll have photos of later, and resin bees. Now, resin bees are the main ones that I've had an interest in. So at Lansdale, we were putting in a garden, marked out where the path was going with garden canes, and within 2 weeks, the little bee had got into the garden cane and started laying its eggs. These bees are called resin bees because they go and collect little bits of resin from the plants that are around, chew it up, take it inside the hole, and they actually wallpaper it with resin. That wallpapers the hole, and it means over summer when the egg's in there, or the grub's in there trying to eat all the pollen and nectar that's inside, it doesn't all lose its moisture and go dry. So, and then between each ball of pollen and nectar they put in there, they put a little resin ball, another ball of pollen and nectar, another ball, and so on until they've filled up the hole. The last 2 eggs they lay in there are unfertilised, so they produce males, which means 2 males come out first, and they sit around waiting for all the females to hatch out. But most of our resin bees either have a nice orange forehead, or they have a nice orange tail, or both. And they spend a lot of their time going and collecting pollen from pea flowers, especially. But anything that's around that's got a hole in it, and in nature it's beetle grub holes in tree trunks and things like that. Sometimes it's hollow twigs. Occasionally it's hollow grasses and things like that, just depending on how big or small the bee is and how big or small the holes are. So different bees will use different sized holes. That's a hole in one of the beet holes that I've got in the garden, and that's a 5mm hole, and the bees just getting ready to load up a bit more nectar in that, because that's where all your honey comes from. It's just bees collecting nectar. They swallow it all down, they find somewhere nice to sit and regurgitate it and play around with it with their mandibles till the water evaporates off and it gets nice, gooey and sticky and turns into honey. And our native bees then mix that with pollen to make the balls that lay their egg in. Some of them will also dig a hole in the ground. That was also at Lansdale. I was raking the ground, get ready to put the path down, and as soon as I raked it, this bee came down. Where's my hole gone? You can see it's fully loaded up with pollen. A lot of our native bees have got long hairs on their abdomen, the females have, and that's where they carry all the pollen. And when they get in the hole, they brush it all off and mould it up. But it goes down quite a way to the ground. It did empty it back out again. I don't know if anything came of it. But, yes, they're quite interesting things. A lot of you may know Bryony Friendly. She actually did this nice A4 sheet about some of the native bees of the southwest, and some of the bees you can see around there are the ones that I've just shown you photos of. So they're the ones that are quite commonly seen, and really interesting and worth watching. because they really get up to some mischief. That was one that was sitting out on a grass tree frond at Star Swamp. It probably spent the night there. None of them actually spend the night in a hole or anything like that. They always spend it out in the vegetation. Quite often in winter, males of all these bees all huddle together on one twig or one piece of grass or somewhere like that. They just hold them with their jaws, fold their legs up, and that's how they spend the night. So if they all huddle up together, they stay a bit warmer. But that one's completely coated in pollen down there, hasn't had a chance yet to clean it all off. And that was taken about 8 o'clock in the morning, so it was too cold for it to be out and about. But there's not much difference really between bees and wasps. They're all from the same group of insects. The difference is that wasps feed their grubs on, usually on meat, generally means other insects, whereas bees are completely vegetarian and their grubs feed on pollen and nectar. So both of them will actually pollinate plants, because both of them as adults only feed on nectar. So even adults of the wasps that you see carrying spiders and things like that around only feed on nectar themselves. The insects they're collecting are purely being collected to feed their grubs on. When they get to the end of a hole, what they want to do is plug it off, and to do that, some of them chew up leaves, especially fresh growth on wattle trees, quandong leaves. I've got quandons in the garden and they're quite soft leaves. This one's actually on the new growth of a young banksia, and it's scraping all the hairs off and gathering them all up into a ball, and it will take them along and use them to plug up the end of the hole. Quite often then they put a little bit of nectar on there, pick up a few armfuls of sand and put that on there, or if you've made a bee pole and it's still got sawdust in there, they'll scrape all the sawdust out of another hole and plaster that over the frame. Anything to try and camouflage it. There are other bees around that aren't resin bees, and this one's quite a specialist of pollinating the native buttercups, the Gebertias, and it knows to get the nectar, it's got to get down behind those anthers, which are up there like a little yellow hand, fingers sticking up, and at the same time it scrapes away at those to get the pollen off. And if you see the little cowslip orchid, which is coming up later, you'll see that the front of the cowslip orchid has got things like little yellow anthers or fingers sticking up there, even though they've got no pollen on them, and they flower at about the same time. So what's happening is one plant's mimicking another one to get the same bee to do pollination. Some of our bees are quite small. That flower is probably about 3 or 4 millimetres across. So tiny little bees, some of them are about the size of small ants. Bigger ones, I think, a lot bigger than that. But unless you actually go out there specifically looking for things like this, you just never see them. That's a nice little golden coloured bee sitting in a marrow flower, and that's one of those that will form big clumps on the ground as males overnight. Both times I've seen them, I have my camera with me, so I managed to get a good photo. It's the same bee that's down on this flower, and you can see the pollen on that's not on the outside of the anther, it's on the inside. That happens with a lot of the lily family, and also happens with all the members of the tomato family. Yellow anther sitting there has got a slit in the end, and inside it's all the pollen. So the bee grabs hold, vibrates its wings and shakes the pollen out. So they call them buzz-pollinated flowers. And the blue-banded bee is actually one of the best buzz-pollinating bees in the world. So that's what this one's done. It's grabbed hold of those, vibrated them, and you can actually see the whole of the underside of the bee is covered in pollen. So every flower that it goes to after that, when it grabs hold, the style's sticking down the middle too, so that wipes up and down on it at the same time and gets some of the pollen off. So as well as collecting for itself, it's pollinating. That's a male blue-banded bee, got its jaws around the twig, hanging onto it, and that picture was taken at night, so it was fast asleep. Can't close their eyes, no eyelids. And there's the same type of bee on a Persoonia or a snotty gobble flower. Now, that's quite a decent sized flower, and the nectar's right down inside the flower here. So these bees have got great long tongues that can go right down into the flowers. Now the introduced honeybee has got a very short tongue, so that's only any good for collecting nectar out of quite short flowers. So a lot of our native plants don't suit them at all, and they've overcome this by actually chopping through the bottom of the flower to get the nectar out, and stops them from getting pollinated, and eventually might wipe out some of our native plants. That's one of our smallest bees. That's very, very specific on what it pollinates. It only pollinates the Morrison, Verticalia nitens. And you can see the size of the thing. It's only about 2.5 millimetres long, and its body's exactly the right colour to match the flower. But that's the only plant that it pollinates, and it's the only known pollinator of that plant. So the Morrison only flowers for about 2 months of the year, so the other 10 months of the year that bee's got to be around as an egg or a grub, not as an adult. So can only collect pollen while the thing's in flower, which is around November, December. This little one I saw up Kings Park a couple of years ago on the Banksia flowers. Beautiful little thing. It's got its wings out and it's flapping them up and down. It's a male and it's putting on a bit of a display to try and get a female. And generally the biggest or the strongest male sits on top of the best looking Banksia flower, and the others come along, and if they think they can challenge, they'll have a bit of a fight. Whoever wins gets the top flower, and the rest have to move down one. Lot of other different bees around, and a lot of different pollination methods. A lot of the melaleucas and things and acacias have all the pollen on the outside of the flower, and the bee can just zip over the top and get covered in pollen, go and find somewhere quiet to hide, brush it all off, and then take it away to the hole. Some of them, like this one, going into our little native violet, the anthers hang over the top, so as it goes in, it wipes all the pollen down its back and over the top of its head, which it's got there. So it's got to try and scrape some of that off, but then it also means it doesn't get rid of a lot, so the next flower it goes into actually takes some off its back, gets pollinated. The fringe lily is another one of the most pollinated flowers. So this little bee here is actually a nice bronze colour, but it's absolutely covered in white pollen. As I was saying earlier, a lot of the resin bees especially are specialists at pollinating pea flowers, and most pea flowers work the same way. They've got the petals sticking out the front and a great big petal at the back they call the standard, and the bee knows it's got to force its tongue down between the back petal and the front petals to get the nectar. And to do that, it pushes really hard on these petals at the front, and when it pushes hard enough to get its head down there, the flower opens up and the anthers pop up and they wipe up down on its tail. So the bee's actually carrying around pollen to pollinate the flower, and when they want to gather up some of that pollen to take back to their nest, they carefully push their way back and gather a bit up, and off they go. Must work well because most of our native bees produce huge amounts of seed. There are some interesting things around too. That's actually called a cuckoo bee, and you usually see them hanging around where there's blue-banded bees. Blue-banded bees nest in the ground, sometimes in mortar in walls. If it's soft enough, they'll scrape it out and make their nest in there. They like a mixture of sand and clay because that's a bit more stable, so they'll get into there. The blue-banded bee will collect the pollen and the nectar, put it down the hole, and when it goes out to collect the next lot, cuckoo bee comes along, zips down in the hole, lays its egg in there, and heads out again. its eggs hatch quicker than the blue-banded bee's eggs do, so first thing its grub does is eat the egg of the blue-banded bee, and then it's got a free food supply. This one is a similar sort of thing, only it's a wasp, and it's a cuckoo wasp, and it's the most beautiful metallic blue. They're quite small. When I first saw it on a piece of wood there, I thought, oh, a bit of tinfoil up there. I went and had a look, and it's this beautiful little wasp. And it sat around for about an hour and a half, and what it was watching was a wasp going in and out of this hole, carrying bits of insect in there that it's going to lay its eggs on. And as soon as it took something nice and big in there and disappeared again, this thing disappeared in the hole, once again laid its egg and out and off again. Find another wasp that's gathering all its food for it. And like a lot of things, there's an assassin bug there that's managed to spear a nice female bee, and it's having a feed. The males come along, oh well, waste not, want not, but so he decided to mate with the bee, but it was a bit too late. She's really getting it. But there's a lot of difference in size and colours between males and females in some of the species. Males are quite often a lot smaller than females. Females are carrying all the eggs, and the males have only got to have enough room for a feed now and again, and that's about it. That's another one of the predators of our native bees. That's called a gas corruption wasp. Now, remember I said that quite often the bee lays its eggs down in the hollow that a beetle grub's left in the tree. So if you want to parasitise something that's down in that hole, you've got to be able to get down where these things are. So Max managed to do it by getting a huge long egg-laying tube, which is actually about that long. It pokes it down the hole there and parasitises the bee and wasp eggs. There's a bee that's had a good feed of nectar from the pea flowers, and you can see it's sitting there, it's spitting it out again, and it's working it round to get water to evaporate off to make the honey. There's the cowslip orchid, and you can see those fingers I was talking about sticking up there to make it look like it's a buttercup flower. And the bee reaches down the back there hoping to get some nectar. These things don't produce nectar, but they've got a nice little sticky disc there, and that puts glue on their forehead, and when they lift their head up, there's two solid lumps of pollen get glued on, which is what she's got stuck on the front of her head there. And the next orchid flower she goes to, after she's tried to scratch this stuff off, the pollen gets stuck on that sticky disc, and a little bit comes off. And next flower, a little bit more comes off, so she can pollinate a dozen or more orchid flowers from one lot of pollen. And when I actually first got to this flower, there were 3 males there with her. And by the time I got the camera out and got down on the ground, 2 had disappeared. And that's where I started finding it. Started off about 15 years ago, but didn't see any bees with them, and they're little resin pots. So instead of taking its resin into a hollow in a tree or anything like that, this bee's actually making little pots out of resin and hanging them on twigs, and then sealing off the top with resin and leaving them out there in the sunshine. People had taken photos of things similar to this before, but nobody had ever seen anything to go with them to know what they were. And then one day I managed to find some with 4 bees working on there. So nearly all of our native bees in the southwest are solitary. They work alone. Female mates when she first hatches out, and that's it for the rest of her life. She goes on finding as many holes as she can, laying as many eggs as she can, and at the end of the season they just die. So completely solitary. And these have started what they call gregarious nesting, which means they all get together in the same place. So I think it may be very, very primitive hive forming in our native bees. So there were actually 4 working on the same set of resin pots, There's one inside there just loading up another lot of pollen into it. There's one here just finishing sealing off the top of the resin pot. So that was the interesting discovery at Star Swan. And since then they've gone back through records and looked at photos and things and think that there's at least 7 species in the southwest that are doing exactly the same thing. But nobody had noticed before. And that's the front page of the paper that was put out. Trying to work out what a lot of our native bees are is very, very difficult because at the moment there's nothing much around to help you. There is a site, the Pests and Diseases site, Padil there, that actually has a lot of useful insects on there as well. It has all the native bees, but it only lists them by name. And if you want to actually see a photo of them, you've got to click on the name, have a look, no, it's not the right one, turn that off, click on the next one, that's not it, and keep going. And all the specimens that have been photographed in there are old museum specimens that have lost most of their hair, lost most of their colour, and almost impossible to identify from. So last year, everybody's talked Terry Houston into coming up with a book on the bees of the southwest. So hopefully it's going to have some good photos in there, and we'll be able to learn a heck of a lot more about our native bees. That's the sort of thing that it's got in there, and you can see how tatty that one looks compared to this one. Different species, but that's the sort of thing that they've got, and all of them have got these nice pins sticking out of them. And a lot of them are 20, 30-year-old specimens too, so it doesn't help that much. A lot of our native plants are specifically set up for pollination by native bees, and a lot of your herbs are ideally suited for native bees as well. Most of the flowers have got quite brightly coloured petals or anthers or anything else on there to attract the insects. They're not the ones that have got very strong scent. Generally strong scented flowers in natives anyway have got white flowers, and that's to attract moths that come round at night. So blue flowers, a few of the pink flowers, a lot of pink has got a lot of blue in it. Insects can see up into the blue colour range, and most of the yellows too are all bee pollinated. So it's a lot of native bee pollinated flowers. Others that you see that have got tubular flowers in yellow or red are generally bird pollinated. We've actually got a higher percentage of bird pollinated flowers in WA than anywhere else in the world. So a lot of nurseries, if you ask for something to attract birds, will give you that sort of thing. But honey eaters may drink the nectar from them, but honey eaters eat insects. So the nectar that they drink is only to give them the energy to fly around and catch the real food, which is the insects. So if you really want to get birds in your garden, you want the insect attracting flowers rather than the nectar flowers. These are all bee pollinated flowers as well, and a lot of them have yellow in there somewhere, usually in the centre of the flower, and yellow is a nectar marker to a native bee. That says, this is where the nectar is, come and get it. And some of the flowers, like the blue tinsel lily up there, actually even change colour when they get pollinated and slowly turn to a deep red on the anthers that said, don't bother with me, I'm not here, just go to the yellow ones. Over in America and some other places, for quite a few years now, they've been producing things they call insect hotels or bee hotels, bee walls, bee poles, and all sorts of things like that. And some of them are extremely fancy, and some of them are very easy and cheap to make. Some of them are absolutely phenomenal. You see the size of that one, there's at least a dozen people standing along there all working on it, so it's absolutely massive. That one I like. We've got somebody in our northern suburbs branch who goes to one of the men's sheds, and they've got all the woodworking stuff there, so I'm looking for somebody like that to pick this up. and start making some really nice varnished bee houses that anybody would want to hang on the wall or sit on a window ledge or something like that. Because I think within a few weeks of putting one up, they'll find out there's native bees everywhere. But only works between about mid-August and mid-February, which is when most of our bees are active. And the rest of the time the holes are plugged up with the eggs and grubs in there. There's some others that you can have boxes stuck up on edge, and got the bits of wood and pieces of bamboo cane and things in there. Some of them are real works of art. This was an interesting one that one of our Friends of Star Swamp members brought in and showed me last year. He's got a barley type gazebo out the back of the house, and some mud wasps have made a mud nest up in the top of it, which is what you can see there. And they hatched out the year before, and the next year there's resin bees in there. So they're actually lining the inside of that nice mud nest with resin and reusing it. And that one's more what they call now an insect hotel. There's places in there for all sorts of different things, and a lot of the time even lizards and stuff like that. But if you've got a permaculture garden and you really want the beneficial insects and things in there, then if you provide them with something like that, somewhere to especially spend winter, then you get a lot more activity out in your garden. And really helps to increase the numbers. I made a small bee pole and hung it on the volunteer house up at Ganchep National Park a few months ago. It's only a piece of pine about that size, and we've got another different little bee in there, and they've just started work, and we've got beautiful yellow markings on, and that one's gone in the hole, and it's actually scraping out all the little loose bits of sawdust that are inside and getting rid of those, so it's nice and clean, and it's ready to line it all with resin. But that's using little 3mm holes.
How deep are your holes?
I'll get onto that. That's a 5mm hole, and that's already been filled up, and the bee that filled it up just took some soil from the ground, mixed it with a bit of nectar, and sealed over the hole with that. That was when I first put my bee pole out in the garden a few years ago, before it really weathered, and a lot of bee activity in there. That's actually chewed up quandong leaf, and that's resin and sand, so all sorts of different things. Different species of bees use different things. And a couple of years ago I was out there with the camera just in time to see this, and that's the first bee to hatch out the bee pole, and it's a male, and he's actually chewed out that plug at the end of the hole and getting ready to hatch out. So that, I think, is the last photo I've got up there. But this is a bee pole. Oh. And that'll get buried up to about there in the ground. The only problem I have with these is ants, which is a real problem because what do ants like? Sugar, honey. Now apparently a lot of our native bees can put out a scent very similar to citronella, which should keep the ants away, but afraid it doesn't always work. That or the rain washes it away after a couple of months and the ants get in there anyway.
Couldn't you put some water around it, sort of set it in cement and have a
yeah, it's got to do something, even if it's. I did try putting a bit of surface spray around the bottom of one of them, but it doesn't last long enough, so it's got to be something better than that. But those holes go through to within about a centimetre of the back of the piece of wood. They don't like it going right through, it needs a back to it. And to actually get through a lot of woods, especially jarrah, with a drill to that depth, just doesn't work too well with a normal drill. You get that far and it jams, take it out, clean it out, go about that far again, gets jammed, take it out, clean it, put it back in again. So I looked around with some different drill bits and found some lovely ones at one of the hardware stores. They're actually multi-use carbide tip drills, and they're for use on plastic, steel, timber, masonry and everything else. And they'll go straight through it with one push, and they're fantastic and long enough to go into any size piece of wood you can find. So that's the sort of thing that I've started on. When with those things that you saw on there, with some of those other bee hotels, if you've got somewhere you can stack all these things, you can use a piece of wood and actually drill in that way, which means you can get in far deeper. And if it's somewhere they can get to both ends, of course, you drill in from both ways and go in about that far from both ends. And there's all these different nest holes. And a lot of them up there too use bits of garden cane, and you can get bits of plastic tubing or anything like that to put them into. You've got to make sure when you cut them just after one of the little joins there, because if you have that at the end, nothing can get through. And then just push something in there to make sure that it's nice and hollow. Stack them all up, big a bundle as you like, and bees will go in there and use them. Blue-banded bees are a bit different. As I say, they like to nest in mud, soil, a bit of water or something like that. And saw recommended somewhere that if you get powdered clay, you mix 1 part clay with 4 parts sand, and put that somewhere that they can get to and use that as a nest. So that's what I've tried with this. Unfortunately, it fell on the floor a couple of days after I did it and chipped a bit. But that's what that mixture is. It's 1 part clay, 4 parts sand. You just push garden stakes into it to make holes. And that's going to go out somewhere nice and warm in the garden about August this year. And hopefully I'll get blue-banded bees nesting in it. But what I was really looking for with the men's shed is getting things like that, polish it up nicely, put the holes in there, you put a bit of a roof over there to shelter it from the rain. Some of the ones that are on websites, they put proper little corrugated roofs over the top. You can make them as fancy as you like. I mean, people do the same thing with bird nest boxes. They can look like something artistic that anybody would want to have around the place. And it's a terrific introduction, especially to kids, to native bees. And you can sit and watch them for hours. I actually set a video camera up on the bee hole and left it there for 2 hours until the thing was full up. Unfortunately, when I tried to transfer it to the computer, it all went wrong and I lost the lot. But there's bees having fights there. One started nesting and went off to get some more pollen, and another one came in and jumped in the hole and sat there with its head poking out, and every time the other bee came back, it just opened its jaws up and growled at it. And when it finally went back in there the other way round, the other bee came out, grabbed it by the backside and pulled it away, and eventually managed to get it out, just whoosh, and threw it away. All sorts of fun things like that. But, yeah.
Is this all going on in like
that's
in the back garden?
In my back garden, yes.
Yeah. Have you got a lot of bush or?
I've got a lot of native plants in the garden, yeah. But I put one up in Mansdale Farm School, where we've got some plants up there, and that's had huge amounts of bee activity. So, yeah.
Do they travel very far?
I don't know exactly how far they go, but I'd say they spread quite a way.
Yes.
But they're probably a bit territorial. So if there's a really good season and a lot hatch out, then they're going to have to spread a lot further to spread themselves out. I got an email the other day saying, it's from someone that lives up where all the Morrison flowers, saying great, terrific guests, Morrison bees. We've got them out here, but where are they for the other 10 months? I said, well, there's a great job there for you. Go and find out, because nobody else knows. They're so small that to actually track the thing and see where it's nesting is almost impossible. There's just so much people don't know, because we haven't really been here that long to study it all. I think thousands of years have been spent on the bees and insects of Europe, and next to nothing on the native ones here.
Did I sting?
If you actually grabbed hold of one, it might sting you, but most of our bees don't sting because they haven't got to protect a hive. And that's the big thing with the feral bees or honey bees. They're trying to protect a big hive, so it's worth the while of a bee sacrificing itself to protect the hive. But if you're solitary, then it's not worth your time doing it.
So somewhere like King's Park, would they be with their big areas, all these different types and
Oh, yes.
place like that?
Yeah.
Like we can start buying tours.
Showing people where, because I mean, I thought bees would be, just ordinary bees type of thing. I have quite a lot in my garden, but I think they're just honeybees.
Nearly all of them that you actually notice are honeybees.
Yeah.
All the others are there, but you just don't notice them too much.
No.
Oh, they're quite useful too. Ideal place for blue-banded bees and things to nest.
Is it best to face them a particular direction? Or does it need to be in the sun or shade or anything?
It helps if there's somewhere nice and warm. I think it helps the grubs develop quicker. I used to face them north, but Lansdale, where I had to put it in, there was actually a light pole on the north side of it, so I turned it around to face south, and it didn't make any difference at all. But I think as long as it's out in the sunshine where it's going to build up a bit of heat in there during the day, it's fine, it doesn't bother me. Only thing I was a bit worried about was too much water getting on the plug side of it, and making the plugs a bit too wet. Drop out.
David, do you have to use native wood? I read somewhere that somebody had one and no bees came, and the answer was given that it was from China and it was with Chinese wood, and the bees wouldn't nest in it.
It may not be the fact that it was Chinese wood, it may be that it was treated before it came over, and that's the big thing to watch. Don't use treated pine, because whatever goes into treated pine will probably die from acid poison. Jarrah's the best stuff. Jarrah's, even though it's really hard, it's a good wood to drill, because it powders as you drill it. A lot of the other things are quite stringy and they actually tear rather than cutting. And that's the problem I had with, wasn't that piece, it was one of the others. I thought it was Jarrah and it wasn't, and I had no end of trouble with it. So I ended up having to plane the thing down afterwards to get rid of the chips and everything like that. I mean, you don't have to plane them, but I find that if you plane the face of it, it makes it a lot easier to mark out where you're going to put your holes and everything else.
And what was the reason for varnishing
Well,
the little mats? Just to make it look...
It would
Nice
look
picture.
like the sort of thing that you could sell at a Sunday market or something, and people would buy it because it looks nice. A lot of people, if they see a piece of raw, rough wood like that, say, oh, I don't want that at home. So, yeah, if you can do it up to look like something that's been nicely handmade, then people will want it regardless of what it's for.
They're paying more too.
Yeah, even if you use contrasting bits of wood like the one I had up there where it had the brown and the white in there together, all looks good. Most people will do anything like that providing it looks good. If it doesn't, they don't want it. Got one that we're going to do up Ganchep when we were out collecting rubbish. bush a few months ago. There was a great big piece of wood, it's about that deep by that across, and this high. It took two of us to lift it. But it's rough as anything. It's been sitting out as part of somebody's shed for probably 30 years. The shed fell down, so they took it out in the bush and just threw it away. So it's sitting there just waiting, but I'm going to have to plane about that much off it to get down to flat wood. But it's going to make a fantastic blue bomb. So I hope that was some interest to you. And if you look, they're there. And if you put up any sort of bee pole, even if it's just a small thing that you hang in a tree, I'm sure you'll find that around August, September, October, that you'll start getting bees active in that, and they'll hang around and pollinate a lot of your herbs.
Do they go for water? Like I've got a couple of bird baths, and when it's hot, the bees go and sit on the edge and have a drink.
The feral bees do, or the honey bees, but the native bees don't tend to. No. I think they're used to the hot weather.
No, the honey bees, they really love it. They all line up around the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.